Her fingers stumble on the same 4 bars just before midnight, again and again. The notes blur into a fog, and the tempo falters no matter how hard she tries. She closes the piano lid with a quiet finality, certain the practice was a failure. When she sits at the keys the next morning, her hands move before she fully decides. The melody flows cleanly through the passage that defeated her hours earlier. Something silently, invisibly, turned her repeated struggle into effortless skill. We often think of sleep as a quiet shutdown for the body and brain, but the brain is far from silent when consciousness fades into darkness. Inside the sleeping mind, a hidden workshop is reshaping the day's experiences. That process decides which moments survive and which simply dissolve. Without it, memory would be a fragile, scattered collection of fragments. What exactly does sleep do to a memory, and why does it require losing awareness? The simplest explanation is that sleep simply rests a tired brain. After all, a fatigued mind struggles to hold on to anything at all. But if mere rest sufficed, lying awake with closed eyes would work just as well. Experiments show that people who sleep after learning remember more than those who stay awake and rest. The advantage is not about being less tired. Something active is happening. Psychologists refer to this active nighttime process as memory consolidation. Consolidation stabilizes a fleeting daily trace into a more lasting record. Imagine moving a quick pencil sketch onto a durable canvas. But the canvas as analogy gives a wrong impression of sleep's true work. Because sleep does not simply preserve the original sketch in perfect detail. It carefully edits, strengthens, and sometimes rearranges the material. To understand how, we must peer inside the sleeping brain. Sleep is not one continuous state. It cycles through distinct stages. Each stage has its own signature rhythm of electrical brain activity. The 2 stages most crucial for memory are deep sleep and REM sleep. Deep sleep, often called slow-wave sleep, dominates the early part of the night. During deep sleep, large slow waves sweep over the surface of the brain. These slow waves act like a conductor's baton for memory reactivation. The brain replays the day's events like a movie on fast forward without sound. That replay strengthens the connections between the brain cells that encode the memory. Without that replay, the fragile new wiring would weaken and eventually decay. Return to the pianist. Her motor cortex replayed the finger movements while she slept. The neural sequences for that difficult passage repeated, gradually refining the pattern. But deep sleep is not a generous curator that replays everything equally. It preferentially strengthens memories that carried emotional weight, urgency, or personal importance. Her frustration with the passage likely flagged it as significant for overnight rehearsal. So the brain tags certain moments for extra processing, like marking a book page. Later in the night, as deep sleep recedes, another stage takes over. REM sleep, named for the rapid eye movements that occur, becomes dominant. In REM, the brain becomes highly active, almost as if it were waking. Yet the body remains deeply still, held in temporary paralysis. This is the phase where most vivid narrative dreaming unfolds. And here memory consolidation takes a completely surprising turn. REM sleep does not just rehearse, it actively transforms and recombines memories. It links the freshly strengthened memories with older knowledge networks. Neural circuits across distant brain regions fire in new, unusual patterns. The sleeping brain searches for hidden connections and extracts the underlying meaning. For the pianist, REM might integrate the piece with other music she knows. She might awaken not just with better fingers, but with a fresh interpretive insight. A nuance she never consciously practiced now feels natural. Thus, sleep is not a passive backup drive. It is an active editor of experience. But every editor makes choices, and those choices have consequences. This editing process can lose details while extracting the core pattern. Studies show that sleep often preserves the gist of an event better than the exact details. False memories can sometimes arise from overly creative recombination during REM. Moreover, stress hormones before bed can over-amplify fear memories, making them more intrusive. Sleep's editing is powerful, but it is not perfectly faithful to the original day. The piano piece will be remembered as a blend of accuracy and personal transformation. Now consider what the pianist actually carries forward after a night of sleep. It is not a detailed recording of her evening practice session. The hesitations, the wrong notes, the aching frustration, those have been pruned away. What remains is a smoothed, refined, and slightly idealized version of her intention. Sleep has kept the musical structure and discarded the performance noise. But something else has happened that she may not immediately notice. A subtle shift in phrasing appears, a slight stretching of a note beyond what she practiced. A passage that was mechanical now breathes with a gentle, unplanned expression. That expression came from REM's work, linking this melody to distant emotional memories. Perhaps it echoed a half-forgotten lullaby her mother once hummed. Her memory of the piece is now more deeply her own, woven into her identity. This is the central revelation. Sleep turns raw experience into personal meaning. It gives us a rebuilt narrative, carefully refined for tomorrow's use. The dramatic question we opened with asked why we must lose consciousness to remember better. The answer is that the brain needs to disconnect from the outside world to restructure memory from within. During sleep, sensory input is blocked or drastically reduced. That isolation allows internal replay to proceed without interference from new experience. If we stayed awake, fresh information would overwrite or jumble the fragile consolidation process. So the very silence of sleep is what permits the noisy work of memory refinement. This is the profound paradox. To hold on to the day, the brain must first shut it out. The pianist's effortless morning was earned by that nighttime embargo. She did not simply recover her skill, she allowed it to be upgraded. Understanding this changes how we see a good night's sleep. It is not a luxury or a pause from learning. It is a critical phase of learning itself. A week later, the pianist prepares for a small recital. She trusts the piece will be there, not because she crammed all night, but because she slept. The melody has become part of her mental landscape, stable and alive. Yet not every night of sleep serves memory consolidation equally. Stress, anxiety, or a noisy environment can fragment the deep sleep needed for replay. As we age, deep sleep tends to decrease, which can make learning feel harder. This is not a personal failing. It is a biological shift that deserves attention and care. For students, the practical implication is clear. Sleep is not a break from studying. A night of adequate, uninterrupted sleep is the final rehearsal before memory is secured. Cramming into the early hours may feel diligent, but it can starve the consolidation process. The pianist's story reminds us that the act of sleeping is deeply creative. Her brain took scattered attempts and built a flowing performance while she was unaware. When the first notes rise in the recital hall, the silence of her past nights will speak. That silence was never empty. It was the sound of memory reshaping itself into meaning. And that quietly is how sleep turns ordinary experience into a lasting part of who we become.